You know the feeling. 3 a.m., ceiling above you, mind running through every unfinished thing from years ago. And somewhere in a monastery on a mountain, a 90-year-old monk is sleeping like a child. What does he know that you don't? You have tried everything. The melatonin, the warm milk, the sleep podcast that you fall asleep to for 5 minutes and then wake up more alert than before. The no screens rule that you follow for 3 days and then abandon. The chamomile tea that sits on your nightstand is getting cold because your mind is too busy to remember to drink it. And still, some nights, you lie there in the dark and your mind does the thing it always does. It starts talking. It goes through the list. Things you said wrong, things you should have done differently. But a conversation from last Tuesday that is still sitting somewhere unresolved. A worry about someone you love that has no solution and no end. And the more you try to stop it, the louder it gets. Until the clock says 3 a.m. and you have not slept, and tomorrow is already beginning without you. Here is what no one in the sleep industry has ever told you. Your insomnia is not a sleep problem. It is a letting go problem, and no supplement, no device, no breathing technique will solve a letting go problem. What will solve it is exactly what a 90-year-old monk in a simple room with no television and no phone has been practicing every single day of his long life. Not a technique, not a ritual, a relationship with the present moment so complete, so honest, so practiced over so many years, that when the day ends, when he simply does not carry it into the night, the day belongs to the day, and the night for him is genuinely, quietly, peacefully the night. Think of your mind at 3 a.m. as a lake in a storm. The surface is churning, moving, unable to reflect anything clearly. You cannot calm a lake by pressing down on the water with your hands. The harder you push, the more it disrupts. The only way the lake becomes still is when the wind stops. Tonight, I want to show you what the wind actually is and how monks have always known how to let it die down on its own, not by force, not by suppression, but by understanding what is driving it in the first place. Today, I want to offer you 3 things. First, why you cannot sleep and why the real reason is not what most people tell you. Second, what the monk does not do from 10 o'clock at night, but from 5 o'clock in the morning, and why the entire day is the preparation. And third, 3 specific things that most of us carry directly into the bedroom, without realizing it, in the simple practice that dissolves each one. Before we go further, I want you to think about the last time you slept deeply, without waking, without the mind racing, without that feeling of being pulled back to consciousness by something unresolved. Can you remember when that was? For many people, it takes a long time to find that memory. And I believe that gap between the sleep you once had and the sleep you have now is not only about your body, it is about everything that has quietly accumulated in the space between then and now. That is exactly what we are going to look at together. But before we talk about what the monk knows, we need to be honest about what is actually happening when the night refuses to bring rest. Because the sleep industry has been telling you one story, and it is only half true. The other half, the more important half, is something they seldom mention. That is exactly where we begin. 1. Why you cannot sleep. Everyone tells you that bad sleep is just part of getting older, just biology, just something you accept. But what if the biology is only half the story, and the other half has been sitting in the dark with you every single night, waiting to be seen? Yes, the body changes as we age. Sleep becomes lighter. We wake more easily. These things are real. But here is what nobody mentions. Those changes explain why you sleep lightly. They do not explain why you lie there with your mind running at full speed through things that happened last week, last year, or 15 years ago. Those are 2 completely different problems. And almost everything the sleep industry sells you addresses only the first while quietly ignoring the second. The first problem is biological. The second is something else entirely. And until you understand what the second problem actually is, you will keep treating the symptom while the cause goes untouched. Buddhism has a term for what happens in the mind at night: the monkey mind. The mind that leaps from branch to branch, from thought to thought, never landing, never settling, never quiet. Most people who cannot sleep know this monkey well. They have met it at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., at 4 a.m. They have tried to argue with it, distract it, exhaust it into silence. But Buddhist teaching does not ask you to fight the monkey. It asks you to understand why it is jumping. Because the monkey jumps when it is holding on to something, and when there is nothing left to hold, it naturally, quietly sits down. 3 kinds of wind blow across the lake at night. So now the first is worry about the future, the health of someone you love, a situation with no clear resolution, something coming that you cannot fully prepare for, no matter how many times you think it through in the dark. The second is grief about the past, a decision you cannot unmake, a relationship that ended without feeling finished, something you said or did not say to someone who is no longer here to hear it. And the third, the subtlest and most exhausting, is the weight of things you are trying to control that simply cannot be controlled. No amount of nighttime thinking has ever changed that category of problem, but the mind keeps trying anyway, as if this time in the dark, it will finally find the answer. No pill addresses any of these 3 winds. They are not medical. They are human. I think of someone I know, a man who told me he woke every night at around the same hour with the same feeling. Not pain, not noise, just a sudden alertness, as if something had tapped him on the shoulder and said, "We are not finished yet." And immediately his mind would go to the same places. A falling out with his son that had been patched over but never truly resolved. A worry about his wife that the doctors said was manageable, but that felt at 3 a.m. anything but. He had tried everything, he told me. None of it touched the real thing, because the real thing was not a sleep problem. It was that he had never learned how to put those things down before he closed his eyes. I believe we have made a serious mistake in how we talk about sleep. We have turned it into a performance to be optimized. But sleep is not a performance, it is a surrender. Boy, and surrender requires something no device can provide: the genuine willingness to let the day be over, to trust that what is unresolved will still be there in the morning, and that the morning, with its light and its fresh beginning, is a far better place to resolve it than the inside of a dark room at 3 a.m. The old sentence is, "I have a sleep problem and I need to fix it." The new sentence is, "I have things I have not finished letting go of, and they are waiting for me in the dark." The question is not how to sleep better. The question is what I am still holding that was never meant to be carried into the night. The lake does not storm because it is broken. It storms because the wind is blowing, and the wind has a source. The monk at 90 does not sleep well because he has a perfect body or a trouble-free life. He sleeps well because over a lifetime he has learned to identify every wind that disturbs his lake, and he has learned one by one how to let each of them go. Before we talk about calming the water, we need to understand where the wind comes from. And more importantly, we need to understand that the monk does not wait until bedtime to address it. He begins at dawn. That is exactly where we go next. 2. The monk's secret. He prepares for sleep at dawn, not at dusk. The monk does not have a bedtime routine. He has a life routine, and the life routine is the bedtime routine. Everything he does from the moment he wakes is preparation for the moment he sleeps, and the distance between those 2 moments is where the healing happens. The entire modern sleep industry focuses on what you do in the 60 minutes before bed. No screens, dim the lights, cool the room, keep a consistent schedule. These things have some value, but they miss a fundamental truth. A good night's sleep is not the result of 60 minutes of preparation. It is the result of 16 hours of living in a particular way. And that way has nothing to do with discipline or routine in the way we usually mean those words. It has to do with presence, by finishing each moment before moving into the next, without leaving behind a trail of things half done, half felt, and half resolved that the sleeping mind will have to return to in the dark. In monasteries, each activity in the day is treated as complete in itself. Washing the bowl is washing the bowl, not washing the bowl while thinking about the afternoon. Walking to the meditation hall is walking, not walking while rehearsing a conversation. This is not a spiritual performance. It is a practical understanding of how the mind works. When each moment is genuinely finished before the next one begins, there is no residue, nothing half open waiting to be closed. And by the time night comes, the mind has nothing urgent left to return to. The lake has been practicing stillness all day. And a lake that has been practicing stillness all day does not suddenly erupt at midnight. So think about the last time you had a day that felt genuinely complete. Not productive, not busy, not packed with accomplishment, but complete, where each thing you did felt fully done before you moved to the next. Those days are rare, and I suspect that on those days you slept better. Not because something chemical changed, because something was different in the quality of your attention throughout the hours before. I think of a woman I know who told me she slept much better during the year she was working than she does now in retirement. At first, this made no sense to her. She had more time now, less stress, fewer obligations. But when we talked longer, she realized something. During her working years, her days had a clear shape. Things began and ended. There were natural transitions. Moments of completion built into the structure of the day. Now the days flowed into each other without edges, one activity dissolving into the next without any real finishing. And her mind, with nothing solid to land on, began doing its restless work at night instead. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote that when washing the dishes, wash the dishes as though it is the most important thing you will ever do, not to become more spiritual, but it is the only way to actually wash the dishes. When you wash dishes while thinking about something else, you are not really there. And when you go to bed while still thinking about the day, you are not really there either. The monk's whole day is made of small moments of genuine arrival, and it is that accumulation of arrivals, that steady practice of being actually present in each ordinary thing, that makes the night quiet. I believe we have been given a false picture of what rest requires. We think it requires the right environment, the right supplements, the right conditions. But the monk's room is simple, his mattress is thin, his pillow is basic, and he sleeps like someone who has nothing unfinished. Because he doesn't. Not because his life is without difficulty, but because he has spent the entire day doing something most of us never do. Finishing things, actually finishing them. In his attention, in his presence, in the small daily act of being where he is until that moment is genuinely complete. The new sentence is not, I need a better bedtime routine. The new sentence is, I need a better relationship with the hours between waking and sleeping. Because the night only asks for what the day has left undone. The monk's lake is calm at night, not because he did something special in the hour before bed. It is calm because throughout the entire day, every time a small wind began to rise, he noticed it and let it pass rather than carrying it forward. By the time night comes, the lake has been practicing stillness all day. And stillness, it turns out, is not a state you arrive at. It is a capacity you build, one small and ordinary moment at a time. So the monk prepares for sleep at dawn, not at dusk. But here is where the practice becomes most specific and most practical. Because there are three things the monk does not bring into the bedroom. Three particular things that most of us carry directly into the night without ever realizing we are doing it. And each one has a simple practice that dissolves it before the light goes out. That is exactly what we explore next. Three. Three things the monk leaves outside the bedroom. The monk does not bring three things into the night, not because he has solved them, not because they don't exist, but because he has learned that the night was never meant to hold them, and neither were you. The first thing, unfinished conversations. Not big arguments, not dramatic confrontations, just the small things left hanging. The tone that came out wrong at dinner was never addressed. The thing you wanted to say to someone you love, but the moment passed. The silence between you and another person has lasted just long enough to become uncomfortable. These things are not large, but they are open, and the mind, which cannot tolerate open things without trying to close them, will return to them the moment everything else goes quiet. Buddhist communities practice something called beginning anew. At the end of each day, they take a few minutes to acknowledge any relationship that still carries tension, any word left unsaid, any moment that did not end as it should have. Not to resolve it immediately, not to make the uncomfortable call at 10 at night, simply to name it, to say, I see you, you are there, and I am placing you here where I can return to you in the morning when I have light and energy and the full capacity to do it well. I think of a couple I know who made a simple agreement early in their years together. Nothing unspoken goes to sleep, not that every disagreement had to be resolved, but that every disagreement had to be acknowledged. Even just these words, we are not finished with this, but we are finished for tonight. That small act of naming changed everything about how they slept. The second thing, the day's loose ends. Not the big unfinished projects, the small ones. The message you meant to send, the call you kept postponing, the thing you told yourself you would do today and didn't. These accumulate in the mind like open tabs on a screen, not actively running but quietly consuming something. And when the external world goes dark and there is nothing else to occupy attention, they surface suddenly and urgently, as though they have been waiting all day for exactly this moment of stillness. The monk does not carry these because he has learned something most of us resist. Not everything needs to be finished today. Some things need to be deliberately and peacefully set aside with the clear intention to return. There is a difference between something unfinished because you forgot it and something unfinished because you have chosen to complete it tomorrow. The first creates anxiety. The second creates rest. I know a man who keeps a small notebook beside his bed, not a journal, just a place where, before he sleeps, he writes down whatever is still open from the day. Then he closes the notebook. He told me, when I close that book, I am telling my mind that I have seen everything that is waiting, and my mind, having been heard, is willing to rest. The third thing, what cannot be controlled? This is the heaviest wind. The health of someone you love is in other hands. The choices people you care about are making that you cannot change. The uncertainty that surrounds everyone who has lived long enough to know how uncertain things can become. These have no solution that nighttime thinking can provide, and yet the mind returns to them again and again, as though this time, in the dark, it will finally find the answer that daylight could not. I once spoke with a woman who told me she lay awake most nights worrying about her daughter, who lived far away. Nothing was wrong, there was no crisis. She simply loved her, and the world felt large. And I asked her, does your lying awake protect her? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, no, but if I sleep, it feels like I have stopped caring. That false equation between worry and love, between lying awake and protecting someone, is perhaps the most painful wound of all, because it asks you to suffer in exchange for something that suffering cannot actually provide. The monk releases this not by caring less, but by understanding something that years of practice have made clear. Holding what you cannot control does not protect it. It only prevents you from being rested enough to help when help actually becomes possible. Each of these three things is a wind, and each has a practice, not a technique for forcing it away, simply a way of seeing it clearly enough to set it down. When the wind stops, the lake becomes still, and a still lake can finally genuinely rest. Most people will carry all three of these winds into the bedroom every night, year after year, wondering why sleep never fully comes. They will never discover that what stands between them and rest is not a chemical or a mattress. It is three specific things that they were never taught how to put down. Tonight, before you turn off the light, ask yourself which of these three you are carrying right now. Name it, then say quietly, "This belongs to tomorrow, not to tonight." It sounds simple, and it is, but simple is not the same as easy, and the monk has been practicing it for a very long time. So the winds have been named. The monk does not fight them. He simply recognizes them, sets them down, and enters the night with nothing unresolved pressing against his mind. There is only one thing left now. What actually happens when everything has been put down and the lake is finally still? Let's finish this together. Remember the lake we spoke about at the beginning? The one churning at 3 a.m.? The one that could not be calmed by force? You have just learned what the winds are, and you have just learned how the monk lets them go. Not by fighting them, not by solving them, simply by seeing them clearly enough to set them down before the light goes out. You do not have a sleep problem. You have a carrying problem. You have been carrying things into the night that were never designed to survive the darkness. The unfinished conversations, the day's loose ends, the things you love that you cannot control. None of these belongs in your bed. None of them has ever been solved at 3 a.m., and none of them will be. The monk at 90 sleeps well, not because his life has no difficulties. It does, but because at the end of each day, he has genuinely, honestly, practiced putting things down. The day belongs to the day, and the night for him is not a battlefield. It is simply what comes after a day that was fully lived. After everything I have studied and every conversation I have had about sleep in the quiet hours of the night, I come back to this belief every time. The sleep you are looking for is not in a better pill or a better routine. It is in a different relationship with the day. A day where each moment is more fully lived, where conversations are more honestly finished, where the things you cannot control are more genuinely released. That is what the monk has, not a secret, a practice, built slowly over many years, one ordinary moment at a time. Somewhere tonight, in a simple room, an old monk is lying down. The room is quiet, his mind is quiet, because nothing happened today. But because he has learned how to let the day be the day, and the night is the night, the lake is still, and in that stillness, sleep comes not as an escape, but as the natural completion of a day that was truly, fully lived. That is what is available to you, not someday, tonight. If this video reminds you of something you have been carrying alone in the dark, please like it and share it with someone who knows what 3 a.m. feels like. Because that feeling deserves more than a pill. It deserves to be understood. And leave me one comment before you go. Which of the three winds visits you most often at night? I read every single one because you were never meant to carry it alone, and you were never meant to carry it into the night. The morning is coming. Let the night be still.